Strange World. Disney's been quite experimental when they decide to get into some action with their animated films these days. Whenever they're not singing the next big musical phenomenon, they explore different genres and themes in order to deliver uniquely thrilling experiences to audiences, and they've so far been pretty awesome. They created their own superhero movie with Big Hero 6, they included social commentary with Zootopia, and they encompass Southeast Asian culture with Raya and the Last Dragon. At least in my perspective, they've all been major hits and definitely up there as some of the best action-packed animated features in recent years. Now, to continue this newly established tradition comes Strange World, whom its unique trait that it brings to the table is having a retro sci-fi theme. An homage to pulp magazines and old science fiction films, even giving the characters a bit of a facelift as a promise that this will be unlike any other Disney animated film. And coincidentally enough, this is even brought to us by the director of Big Hero 6 and Raya, Don Hall. If we look back in Disney's history, this is a bit of a risk for them to return to the genre, since they've rarely had good luck whenever they try to put their own spin on it, especially Atlantis and Treasure Planet. I know they're nowadays considered cult favorites, but back during their initial releases, they made Disney lose a lot of money. So yeah, that's what I mean when I say that they're a big risk for Disney. So now that we're heading to Avalonia, will Disney accomplish their mission of having a successful sci-fi film? Or like its new comedic character, will this movie's quality go splat? Let's find out. The story. Speaking of Atlantis and Treasure Planet, have you ever wished that Disney would make more of those types of films? Well, you know Disney. They love making wishes come true, and Strange World is that granted wish. The story is an action-adventure that prioritizes the world building, having the characters find themselves in uncharted territory unlike anyone has ever seen, and get familiar with the place in order to understand what is actually going on with the situation, and how would they be able to use the environment in order to achieve their mission. I'll give it credit that, as it is one of the main assets here, the world building is also one of the film's strongest, giving audiences the time to be familiar with Avalonia and how people are able to build an entire civilization in that area, especially with these plant-like specimens called Pando as their electrical fuel source. The Pando is also an integral piece to the movie as it not only fuels the town, but also the narrative, since its energy is quickly depleting and it's up to the team to get to the bottom of it. Kind of literally, in fact, since the titular Strange World lies under their feet. And not only do they have to explore the place while also giving time for the audience to immerse themselves in the world, but to also find out what is actually happening to the Pando.
I'm not my father. He was the explorer.
I know you were just a kid when you went missing, but now you're all we got.
However, in order to truly make that dream come true, they have to also include some flaws that cause both Atlantis and Treasure Planet to be one of Disney's weaker features, and this movie is no different. The source of its problem is the prominent theme of the father-son relationship. I'll say now that I do understand what they were going with. The purpose of the theme is to convey the message about being yourself. But this isn't the same message you hear all the time in kids' films. This one is a little more complex that discusses the importance of being true to who you are, but also that you should acknowledge how those who raised you play a big part to who you've become. It's a solid message, and there is an idea of what the team at Disney wanted to do with it. However, the execution is just a mess. The majority of the time when either Yeager and Searcher or Searcher and Ethan have a moment together, they mostly spend their time just angrily arguing with one another. It really does feel like the movie is making you sit right in front of an actual family argument. It's uncomfortable, you wish to leave so that you don't get caught in the crossfires, and worst of all, it makes the characters kind of unlikable and the adventure to be awkward that some of it has to be spent with that. I mean, it's a bit hard to get into the picture when the heart of the movie is supposed to be the father-son bonding, and you're not enjoying either the father or the son.
He's awesome!
He is not awesome!
He just saved my life!
You know, I was a part of that rescue too!
But just to flip it to the positive for a bit, I have to mention that by the climax of the feature, the movie includes a big twist. Now I know some people might be rolling their eyes now because Disney in recent years doesn't have a great reputation when it comes to adding twists. However, without spoiling anything, this one is not what you think. It's actually a really good and effective twist that gives the movie quite a surprise and completely changes your perspective of the whole picture, and actually makes a lot of sense to the creative choices that were made here. There is an idea going on in this movie, and a real good one too. It proves that the strange world itself is worth exploring, but it's the family issues that makes the story a bit of a tough journey to go through. The animation. As a tribute to old sci-fi stories, Disney went a bit more in a different direction than their usual signature style. And with the great amount of resources that they generally have for their animated features, one of the best things to say about this movie is how it has some gorgeous animation. Considering how their resources are vastly large, that is reflected by the size of Avalonia itself. With how big the different areas can be, and presenting itself as this massive place with so much to explore, they play a big part in how the film can feel so immersive, and take the time to envelop in all the details that it surrounds itself to highlight the science fiction element, whether it be the technology used in the town, or the surreal nature of the strange world, filled with weirdly shaped faceless creatures who serve a purpose to the land.
We are clearly in uncharted territory.
Whoa.
Another thing that really does make it stand out is the bold use of colors. This isn't the kind of feature that splatters the whole screen with an entire rainbow. It carefully chooses a selected few to help with the visual storytelling. From the radiation green of the Pando, to the rustic town with Earth-like natural colors of Avalonia, to the oddly bold use of purples, oranges, pinks, and some blues and reds within the strange world. The effects are another tool used to enhance the environment, and they're used quite heavily here to show what the strange world can do, and how do the explorers interact with it, such as light, fire, slime, and particles. But the best use of all this with the size, colors, and effects is whenever there is some action. Some of the best moments of the picture is whenever there is an action scene going on, as it emphasizes the life-threatening dangers that they're in and not knowing what they've gotten themselves into. It knows how to keep the moments intense and suddenly have the viewer be more engaged with the risks that the explorers are taking. On a side note, there are also a couple of times like in the opening and Jaeger's flashback where the animation gets more stylized to feel like you're reading a comic book, which helps set the mood of the kind of adventure you're about to get into. But then you have the new look of the characters, where instead of going with their classic style, they went with something a little more cartoony that reminds me a bit of the Asterix comics with the smaller eyes and the big round nose. As much as the characters are very well built with great use of textures on them, I can't help but feel like there's something a little bit off with this style, especially when not everyone in the film has that new design. It's like half of them have that new look, while the others, especially the women, still have that Disney style. The same can be said with some of the character animation, where some go a bit more over the top with their movements to highlight that this is an animated film that they acknowledge that kids are also watching, especially with Splat.
Do you mind if I call you Splat? You just kind of give me Splat vibes. Ow! I guess I deserve that.
But again, not everyone moves in that goofy fashion, which makes the animation sometimes look weird with how it wants to try a different style, but doesn't fully commit to it. Don't get me wrong, the animation on the characters is still very well done. It's just a minor element that the team should have either gone all out with it, or shouldn't even bother to include. But even with that little issue, it still doesn't change that the animation makes Strange World a beautiful world to witness. The characters. I'm not gonna say that the movie has a bad cast, but what I can say is that Disney had definitely made better characters that are worth exploring with. The thing with the people of Strange World is that I could see where they were going with them and how they are developed throughout the picture, but again, the execution is a little dysfunctional for them to effectively work in the film. The one praise I can give them though is that the voice cast did great. You can hear in their performance that they really want to make their characters special, especially with the fact that they want to do their best with their contribution on a Disney animated feature. At the very least, they help the characters be tolerable with how their emotions feel genuine, and sometimes add a little fun like Dennis Quaid really playing up the heroic explorer with Jaeger.
How are you my dad?
Well, when two people love each other...
Stop talking! Stop talking! Stop talking!
Classic Jaeger Clade.
With that said, let's talk about the stars of the movie and its biggest problem, the Clades. Again, there is an idea with these characters, and they are legit good ideas that can make strong protagonists. You got Searcher, who is stuck in the middle of reuniting with his long-lost dad that he resents, and being a good father to Ethan. Jaeger is the passionate explorer with the lifelong mission to find a path to what is beyond the mountains of Avalonia, and Ethan, who's trying to come in terms that he doesn't want the life that Searcher set for him as a farmer, and his rebellious attitude comes from the need to build confidence that he wants his own independence, since he doesn't have much confidence to begin with, as illustrated with his difficulty to ask out the guy he really likes named Diezo. They all have the materials needed to create great characters, but the one thing that holds them back and make the overall viewing experience not as pleasant as other Disney films is their dynamic. They're all headstrong and stubborn where, most of the time, all they do is get mad at each other and argue, which sours the mood of the picture and, again, makes them kind of unlikable with how selfish they all are. I get that they are 3 generations of the same family, but do they all have to have the same flaws of not listening to each other?
Grandpa's awesome!
He is not awesome! You gave me a machete for my birthday?
Classic Jaeger Clade.
I was 2.
As for the other significant characters, there's Meridian, Searcher's wife, who became the pilot of the mission, and is kind of like the cool mom where she knows what's best for Ethan, but also her charisma adds a little fun to the adventure. There's Callisto, who is a family friend of Searcher, and the badass leader of the mission to figure out what is happening to the Pando. And then there's the comic reliefs like Splat, Disney's latest non-verbal psychic, who meets the crew and becomes the communicator with a bit of an attitude. Honestly, one thing I almost forgot to mention is that the movie's comedy is weak. It tries to add some humor to lighten up the mood, but they often come out flat because they try too hard to get a laugh out of the viewer, and that's why Splat doesn't do much for me. He feels more like an excuse for the animators to play around with an abstract character.
What in the...
And then there's Legend, who is a dog. There's nothing else to it, he's just a clueless 3-legged dog. And that's why he is the greatest character of the movie. That dog alone makes watching this worth it. And I can guarantee that almost every gag that can get a laugh comes from him.
Hey, boy, come on, open the door.
Come on, Legend. You can do it. Come on, Legend. That's the baby. That's Mama's baby. That's Mama's baby. You can do it.
The characters do have the right materials to be an excellent crew for this adventure, and some do their jobs well. It's just that the ones who are leading this should have settled their problems beforehand. Ever wanted Disney to make another movie like Treasure Planet? Well, here it is, another flawed but still decent sci-fi adventure. Technically, Strange World is the weakest film from Disney Animation in recent years, but that doesn't change that this is a solid feature as is. Yes, the leading characters and the father-son dynamic is dysfunctional to the point of making the experience a bit unappealing, and the comedy isn't good, but it still has some strengths that makes the movie worthwhile, like the impressive world building, the amazingly immersive animation, strong voice acting, and the intense action scenes. I personally don't find this to be a high priority to watch as much as the previous Disney films, but I'd recommend this to those who love Disney's more action-packed animated films. I'd rather stick to something like Raya or Rescuers Down Under myself, but if you consider Atlantis or Treasure Planet as one of your favorites, then I think you'll have fun with this too. It was a rough mission to accomplish, but I think what I've seen is enough for me to give the Animat seal of approval. To Legend, because he's a good boy. Not to the movie though. I mean, it's good, but not that good.
What is that sound? Is he licking the switch? Legend, stop licking the switch. Legend, stop. Legend, stop licking the switch.